Hello, Americans, people of the human species body, of individual bodies. I can demonstrate to you the hyper-evidential. I can demonstrate to you natural law taught by nature itself. Black pupils, whites of eyes, for example, in the value of the scientific value of the breaching method that had assigned before America's founders were born nature to communicate other than nature when it's not criminal insidiousness per nature, as we can observe nature demonstrates. For example, any one of those that entertains the laws that were entertained, that were entrenched at the countries that had rules with it too. So when we describe it, we leave out the breaching method rules with everyone's name, with the hyper-algorhythmic, so to speak, with the algorithmic. The republic for which we stand and its database's identity of relativity to all our names is also demonstration of the existence of relativity / hyper-relativity. Because not just the other species bodies in our own, we have quality aspects in nature, distinct but also non-distinct. Per that further, and they are simultaneously with us, but per that further hyper-simultaneous as part of the ways we could discern it. Again, but we have also not just having not addressed the way our founders communicated to address about it, that which was entrenched with those laws and slavery, for example, the concept of it, to know, because they can, in other words, it's described exactly the way the breaching method only allowed. Otherwise, that body would be sensed, even if it was a group of people, even if it was a majority, even if it was everybody together, Black pupils. We are in a semi-ancient trap that came from before modern religious messengers were even born. It's also hyper-evidential where and how that was left and is left out, where people pretend that integrity has spoken for the law, the sciences, names, individually grouped together, including the law. There a collusion /s. Thank God that we can discern. Like, for example, regarding witch trials, the syntax and their defenses of their logic regarding what witch trials are about, the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the branches of government as criminal insidiousness nature, because there are relative collusions with them and with a whole bunch of different countries with the same ones, and overt criminal enterprises news names next to every location, because there is a method keeping and having kept employments of all natures of difference, therefore all natures of knowledge of good and evil, collusion /s, incapable of affording to be, let alone to protract, short words with convictions proper, per syntax and per exceptions, and per exception nature. Before the World Trade Center attack at Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, since before everyone was born, Central Connecticut State University, all the campuses of all ages and natures, no, even fire campuses and medical campuses, they are used by a breaching method measuring and maintaining syntax relative to these employments that the breaching method employed, only allowed, and roles with it sustained, self-value, in responses to questions that it also maintained, effective uses, where and how it propagated, only allowed to be, self-valued syntactically, the branches of government, a whole bunch of different countries, intelligence, the difference between that, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, insidiousness of people A through Z that came through not just information and data sabotage, and collusions to the screen, actual motivations. This breaching method knew that nature itself was going to demonstrate. A human fact-cheaping nature breaching method is one of the things that is true always. That all those crazy things that were entrenched to torture, extort, and enslave the fact-cheaping nature of America's founders before they were born, and everyone, sickly distinctly. That's why they have black pupils, whites of eyes. Now, see, there are things that appear to be debatable, and we don't have it. We're not afforded a quality of fact-cheaping nature necessary to deal with them simultaneously from things that aren't even debatable, that are forced. They're pretending, they're changing and faking what people say relative to predicate acts with facts. I am not a lawyer. I am not a police foreman. I am not a judge. We can record it, how the judges, the prosecutors of work criminal enterprises, private ones, they all had unnatural impositions that, and only known since they were kids, told to call that natural, leaving out how it's only natural as criminal insidiousness, that a breaching method propagated to and sustained to only allow self-value, roles self-cultivating, that propagation, and what it caused and keeps, which is nature's identity, its identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that, which is coupled with this Earth's a special difference, or not, or it is forced from here. Lethal ideas is more probably forced space nature transfer. It is more probable and practical to theorize, let alone to convey, that both Islam and the Old Testament and Judaism are about how the ancient sciences became criminally foreign influence. So now everyone's using differences, their own and our others, to defend syntactical values by them and used in relativity. That is tactilitarian from how nature employed our differences A through Z. We are a human species body of individual bodies. And again, we have those other species bodies, distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous, for that which is further hyper-simultaneous. Before I ever heard of a hypersonic missile, I was using hyper to discern that distinct nature of simultaneous nature. That nature itself shows us we need to appreciate as a scientific value. And to all the things relative to it, because it comes with means to discern relativity / hyper-relativity. And for example, criminal insidiousness as a nature, it is one of the things that is a part of the answer / S to how and why people could stay motivated to change the communications of America's founders. See, this breaching method measured and maintained / maintains use / S of sabotage of each age of fact-cheaping nature. For example, they replaced what our founders communicated using what they said, leaving out what they declassified, which is for us to understand, no matter who made up the witch trials, what extent they were made up, what they were about is that human fact-cheaping nature breaching method that was entrenched with changing the and forbidding what is actually communicated by and the revelations that come from being generated by. How we have black pupils, whites of eyes, same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. For that identity, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that. Those three values as 3 volumes of hyper-invisible but still discernible, that come with the appreciation proper of modern languages A through Z, even anything that can be made up. It is the same volume science that is species body of individual bodies, all group differences being generated, group difference slash S being generated. And that's part of the lesson with what that slash S. Someone's writing here. Oh, so in other words, I put a Ray McGovern and Judge Napolitano just recently did a live stream together. I encourage all to take a look at the live stream section of Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom YouTube channel. I'm not affiliated with them, but I know it is hyper-evidentially recorded that and how Fox Connecticut News, WFSB, and WTNH have predicate X method slash S roles with intelligence families next to them, who are simultaneously with a whole bunch of foreign ones, differentially with the ones worse, with timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and people and terrorists, and worse. See, this breaching method knew that any grouping of countries, any leader, no matter how powerful they would get, they would have to entertain styles of syntax at locations, areas, and states that can't defend that and ourselves at the same time. So I'm also being forced to leak what I want to do with computer program. But this is also hyper-evidential because I begged Judge Napolitano through the comments section too, because the intelligence community, the difference between their guilt too, like CIA, FBI, and state police families interstates, and they have state police with Connecticut's forensics location involved with a folklore with more child offenders, leaders of kids forced, and per the interbranch and foreign, as the ones criminally foreign, retired police chiefs from Wethersfield through time, increasingly roles with years apart, first force child abusers, leaders of kids, time use slash S of them roles, which were simultaneously time collusion with relative confessions from strangers, intercities, on and off the campus, and roles with murders, untimely death spots, and body dumping spots. 2 years apart, time use of it. Same ones involved with World Trade Center predicate acts. WFSB attached me to fake conversations with them about the World Trade Center to plant fake evidences. So the hyper-evidential shows, in other words, they attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others about the World Trade Center attack. And they have worse, sometimes ways worse, roles attaching others from the World Trade Center attack context who were there in New York, interstate. In other words, to fake conversations too, to change conversations, the same as collusion to slash S too, increasingly with all sides of the case in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center, and with people with the spots next to it the night before, and those same names long term, intercities and interstates and intra campuses. They're originally still the difference between them, the overt criminal enterprise. That's where the difference is exploited. Many ways worse than what's maintaining killings and things like that. Like at all locations, sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly. See, this breaching method made the fact-cheating nature, torture, extortion, and slavery of our founders sickly distinctly. It made a method that knew that there would be founders, and it had a method to measure and maintain and keep breaking any nature of sophistication that would come up, because it would sense it, because there's already too many natures of collusion against what could defend itself and afford to be, let alone project any voice that is going to need to speak about what were the real is the cause of the worst negative value nature progressions, acts, and nature. Acts like predicate acts. Nature's like criminal insidiousness. Nature's criminal insidiousness itself. Wrongdoers, wrongdoing itself. So in other words, those laws forced it. And that's forcing, in other words, more and more people incapable of affording to be, let alone to protract convictions the way nature has relativity to what is positive and negative simultaneously. This is how programs work. I have the phenomena. This is the phenomenon they are exploiting to work. Are you fight? I had many fights through USA Boxing. I have not gotten my professional boxing license yet. What weight do you fight at? The human species body of individual bodies have all group differences in demonstration of the hyper difference generating that. And relative to this, and to the difference between the nature, because there are three parts to any extent, there are three parts of time that are grouped. For example, there's an extent of time that we know that all individuals are shown to an extent they know was true always. There's an extent that is active truth now, that is connected to that we know to is true, connected always true. Per its system, not criminal insidiousness nature, too. In other words, and there's an extent like the seasons. We know about their value is true now, before it even gets here. To an extent, we know always. So those three parts of time are grouped, and we have the what came before that we know we don't know about, but we know it existed because we know this identity of the forever nature. That's one of the things simultaneously that the identity of that appreciation scientifically of the identity of hyper simultaneous. Again, the hyper simultaneous is discernible because of how we are distinctly simultaneous, distinct species, and then we have our own species body of individual bodies. And again, being generated by that which has them. In other words, we didn't invent how and why we have two eyes, and other species bodies have the same phenomenon, even fish, even bugs. Quality aspects of nature, consciousness, distinctly, but also non-distinctly, and simultaneously again, but / hyper simultaneously. In other words, nature itself shows us it causes negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures if we use systems tactically ulterior from its own. And it knew that it developed a method to show people how they could get away with self-valuing roles or themselves. And everyone has rules blaming other things, others themselves. For example, with our founders communicated for us to blame on the human fact-achieving nature breaching method. People aren't even allowing people to be, how they get away with people not being allowed to be, like, for example, the judges, in his defense, Judge Napolitano's. In other words, we're in the house. I can't get a response for that mandated law because the Connecticut judges and people on up the state judicial branch offices, on up the state corrections offices, and the differences of their guilt there, or the people next to it, or driving by. They've been roles with this breaching methods, roles keeping countries A through Z, for example, with the subject treatments, like with intelligence. They're using what they know about serious things like wars and about how the countries were only capable of blaming how and why they really tortured themselves, extorted themselves, and keep fact-keeping nature enslaved themselves. See suits and ties, counters, exceptions relative to how the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born. with slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. And, and the narratives regarding how and why they have that sickly distinctly north and south. And the narratives regarding how and why their motivation is for saying what they say formally, and or the difference between that and everyone else. Clearer than day, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, for them, even if they're undercover or whatever it is, just standing positions. See, this breaching method assigned uses of difference roles. Otherwise, that body was sensed. This breaching method knew that it would cause roles with its method would cause increasing nature to demonstrations, not just of itself, of the breaching method, in other words, but needs for people to react to syntax nature. With words, syntax, laws. This has the science's names abridged, and that's self-value. So rather than using the hyper-evidential, the CIA, the FBI, the military, intermilitary, a number of different Marines families, for example. Judge Napolitano is reportedly retired Marine. People see countries have these people. People will sacrifice their lives for others who no one's worthy of it at countries A through Z, because when they are asked questions, and when, in other words, at A through Z, the locations, areas, and states are recorded. Uses of logic in regarding the value of a name, of parties' differences, as collusions with that method that forces no quality of fact human nature at courts and or at regular locations, or online, all exceptions, a quality of fact human nature necessary and capable of being and longed for by every person, but not through a breaching method, let alone not through a breaching method and all roles with hyper-additional motivations, natures, needs, interests, styles affected that the breaching method effectively uses. Because everyone where people spoke about what caused slavery, their roles measured and maintained, communicating other work for them what our founders behind James Madison's plan. And then the presidents who agreed to help them, beginning with George Washington. And so he became the first president / chief, which nature itself, not just our founders, is showing us is 3 volumes. Because every value, in other words, know how our bodies have an individual group identity, but also of individual and grouped identities are individual bodies too. They're grouped that way too. And then, in other words, not just the simultaneous. The physical body comes with the hyper simultaneous. This which is surging through all things alone. Well, not as them, but anyway, even force. It is not the force. Well, it is the force anyway, or what is force, what is the value of it. See, but we have value systems apart from its method, its use of exceptions, exception nature. So the agencies that have you at countries A through Z, there are means that nature shows us that we could discern where and how the uses of their difference. The lawyer of the former Wethersfield police chief, Cintron, is recorded with roles with recorded use of the difference, U/S, of the difference between public television or community television, public television, public No, community television. I forgot what the phraseology of it is, what the name of it is. Community access television. Like, for example, with a Peruta also, they have rules forbidding mandated law right outside of courtrooms, outside of police stations. That are also rules with them too. Attaching little kids to fake conversations with police and at the police station that never were. All kinds of natures of organized crime with fake conversations with me that WFSB pretended. Also about the World Trade Center attack. They also pretended I had fake conversations with others about that, and about and with doctors. And they changed communications with people I had, 2 words with. In other words, they won't get on paper with this too. So that I'm recorded being tortured, extorted, in fact, human nature enslaved, therefore physically enslaved by people that colluded with the World Trade Center attack. That also had time roles like a Ray Reynolds with names next to each of the campuses. I only went one. I only saw him on campus when I was in kindergarten, and then that school closed. And there's a DeMora family involved with people with the name I don't know, different people with the names F, like I don't know, has something to do with his roles with people all along roads and routes, in the corner of Walcott Hill Road and Church Street, with FBI Director Robert Luskin, and with people associated with a Mike Pandoff and his brothers and family members, and all sides of criminal and civil cases associated with them, who are also involved with judges and prosecutors, with people all along Route 3 and Route 175, where they do to this trick, making people use others' names so they pretend that they're putting fake. In other words, they're forcing me to use other people's names per the relativity of this intercities. They made all the kind of confessions that are increasingly tied to ones who did speak with the police when they were kids. They increasingly have time collusions with overt criminal enterprises, plural, and private ones, a whole bunch of different countries, and people on all sides of campuses, including at Hartford Hospital, concentrated. And these are people with wire crimes, with judges and prosecutors, family members, where they whole methods of them, predicate acts methods, where they fabricate and change. They just make fake police transcripts with the phones, as police phones families who were locked to collusions and pretending others, so screening it in their actual motivations with the World Trade Center interstates, the same ones intercities and international, but also per further hyper international. And it also hides behind groupings of humanity blamed until it was true. Like with the United Nations, they have roles with all kinds of delusions and psychiatry, which is involved with these different countries with nuclear bombs pointed at each other. Meanwhile, there's delusions wrought relative to the relativity of black people's whites of eyes. How we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time, and how this is with exceptions. We have the same color eyes, black and white, except how, in other words, and this is being projected by nature as nature, unobstructed, just like how it has those 3 identities of time, where nature itself is directing not just truth, but the questions by it. See, this breaching method employed everyone to ask questions for itself. I've learned that notes at Central Connecticut State University that there were laws against colonists, that if anyone was found out to have heard someone speaking about building a house outside of internationally monitored conversation, they were hurt, killed, tortured that person and everyone next to them. like their own family, even though they're not able to impress it. Some moron spoke something out against the law, and then in other words, they had a rat trap against rat trap. So everyone starts using the breaching methods and means and nature only allowed as their own weapon, as styles, tactical terror from what could be defended and afford to be, let alone to protract. Anyone using correlation slash hypercorrelation, therefore, vaccines, I teach those things below. In other words, I beg Judge Napolitano because they've changed FBI too. The difference of the FBI, Connecticut forensics locations, and people with like waiting forensics roles with a Phil Cololo, increasingly on my street with the same house involved with wire crimes and people involved with body dumping spots, increasingly tied to waiting forensics, and people who were their classmates, intercities involved with also medical families, foreign and domestic, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and making fake exceptions. And ones that weren't at all also pretended, like a Joshua Julian is one of the ones who were pretending fake exceptions of knowing me. That I don't know at all. There was no exceptions. He was trying to make fake ones. And I was only at that place. I don't know if he was at that place on Main Street, a place associated with a Daryl Chandler at my graduation, which got mixed with maybe they made me stay back because they're planting cover-ups from what I caught them doing every year, increasingly tied to the year before that. So I began with the Ray Reynolds because he was also brought up. He's recorded roles a whole bunch of different ways as one of the people that forced the Saudis to use Saudi Arabia's identity remotely, and as the ones that simultaneously used Americans' intelligence identity remotely. I never saw Ray Reynolds on a campus besides that one. I barely ever had words with him. They tried to make a fake exception by having me go skiing with them in Vermont. Also involved with sequence shifts with them and the FBI and state police involved with the writing forensics, with digital crimes, with a principal upskirt nature, and Middlesex Community College involved with them, and Wethersfield police with their phones too. As ones who pretended too that I had conversations with the police at the police department when I was a kid that weren't also through the news. These are police that have also been switching names and refusing to identify themselves. And they have family members, they have their kids and their adults and their roles with Rocky Hill schools, Hartford schools, Newington schools. I believe I have to check that. In other words, my memory about that. In other words, but it's intercities, and it's also with the security of it. They put something in and increasingly there are probate judges and prosecutors and their family members and superior court judges and people associated with Connecticut District Court and all with next to the corrections and judicial offices who have roles on my street with connections between untimely deaths years apart that made them timed use of it. Also with people associated with the name Lewis. I don't know what all that. I tried to make a fake exception years ago. They jump out of a car and went like that, grabbed me. In other words, I never saw her again. And then with one of the ones involved at Trinity College, people associated with my former neighbors recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. In other words, things non-verbally, just like former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act. He has collusion /S at and next to Fox Connecticut News in downtown Hartford with a whole bunch of people through time who have been all along roads and routes and on and off campus roles with whole predicate acts with fax methods, not just relative to these overt ones we could discern. where and how other things, others, in other words, I'm not even a lawyer. There's a Trantolo and Trantolo. I barely had any conversation with at all. He's pretending I made a conspiracy theory to him. He's one of the ones forcing child offenders by faking and changing what people say, and collusions with the fake digital evidences, with the intelligence next to Fox Connecticut News, as the same ones next to WFSB, as the same ones involved with as the sources of WTNH all along Main Street and Old Weathersfield, along that route, Wells Road, all the way along that Route 175 through Weathersfield, Newington, up to Central Connecticut State University, and all sides of it have rules with people that planted predicate acts on my street when I was in roles, when I was in grammar school, middle school, and high school, connected to the same house/s involved with the wire crimes of the Weathersfield police, now switching and forging names with other police forms, attaching me to faked and changed conversations with people about things I need to communicate about intercities. The police offensively recorded themselves communicating to me that they could never be, and demonstrating to me that they could never be trusted. So are the courts. The New Britain Superior Court has their Facebook page involved with a whole bunch of names with the name KNERR and with the name KERR, and people on Twitter with the name Ian, involved further with upskirt pictures, further tied to the principal upskirt nature. I never had a conversation with a Dillon family. There's a Kevin Dillon, an Anna Dillon, and / Annie, name switching too, relative to locations associated with her and which she puts her name up. In other words, and a Thomas Dillon. So you have the security involved with medical families. There's one's named Leahy, who pretended through the mail they had conversations with me. In other words, a whole bunch, and they forged names of other doctors apparently too, of a Dr. Shamsi Ali, for example, who's one of the ones involved with foreign and domestic intelligence intercities. A whole bunch of people tied to a Mike Pandolf and a computer teacher and his kid is associated with and his wife. You know, their family has intelligence in Glastonbury, who have a whole bunch of people that enter campuses that have been attaching me and others to faked and changed communications, faked and changed natures of ties and ties to other people. They have rules with boxing gyms too, planting evidences and collusions where the differences between overt criminal enterprises being guilty, the three branches of government, the intelligence, those are things they hide behind. In other words, pretending that guilt law always has to be associated with guilt. That's recorded too, where and how they are being and haven't been used remotely also as evidence. How they get away with it. Because that's one of the things that we could discern where and how you guys were obligated to allow people to be honest about it if you can't do it yourselves. Clearer than day. Yeah, what slavery was about was a predicate acts with facts method that employed how and why nature communicates forbid and other to be pretended until faked exceptions would be roles would be self-valued. Where having been propagated styles of logic in nature that can't defend themselves and afford proper syntactical counters to the real causes of things like criminal insidiousness and criminal foreign influences, the impositions of them at all locations, areas, and states, because it's everywhere the species body is, because it's per hyper criminally. All locations, areas, and states are hyper criminally foreign influence. That's how we have great countries like America and China wearing suits, and Russia and Ukraine wearing suits and ties. counters, exceptions. No one mentions that which nature itself is demonstrating about the suburbs, because everyone had the campuses A through Z and their differences used also to measure and maintain self-value rules, but how it uses it. Communicated other for our founders. Our founders communicated for us to understand the human fact-checking nature breaching method. The free speech showed nature itself shows us. That's one of the things, true always. Nature, our founders would demonstrate, demonstrate. They're going to have it blamed on things like prejudice, racism, to measure and maintain other than itself. The breaching method rolls with it and/or rolls with it, blamed. To hide behind that. To hide behind people pertaining to motivations, speaking about their own motivations or others. This is inseparable from everyone's motivations. A breaching method assigned, black and white, not to be able to communicate how it communicates. The identity that you have is that why it is that way. Its identity relationship to itself and the value of that. In other words, we could be systems ulterior than its own. But Earth's a special difference, our own special difference, is forced away from here. Leaf of high D's. Nature itself is showing us why and how. We need a calendar with 365 days a year. And we need to adjust. It is more probable and practical to theorize, let alone to convict, like with things the science, let alone some of the things the sciences theorize, let alone convict. That boxing, the identity behind it, long as we try to hear the song it sings, even though it does not make a sound. As long as we try, anyway. Many pray, boxing. In other words, boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are grouped by the identity the sciences share. They're grouped by nature's identity, its identity relationship to itself, and the value of that, which is only increasing. And again, increasingly as systems that we could discern, because its identity of relativity to what is positive and negative, distinctly from all other volumes, while non-distinctly at the same time. This is why it's necessary to discern. In other words. And so it can be back, in other words, just like we could have, this is going to be, this hyper-programming appreciates lists. And the human mind appreciates lists and means to receive, communications that we are forbid free speech about. All exceptions and exception nature that appear to be in demonstration of other, they come with demonstrations of the same thing, /s. So we have to ask, not to litigate from the bench. And Judge Napolitano, he's not even on the bench anymore, I believe. So in other words, but we have to be able to use the hyper-evidential. In other words, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists. They have them grouped wrong so they can keep the people defending themselves syntactically, calling others extremists, for example, incapable of defending that and of affording discerned roles with the predicate acts with facts delivery system method, leading up to and sequence shift delivery system roles. All sides of the Ninth Circuit, names on all sides of the Ninth Circuit Court, next to the World Trade Center right before the attack. And the court itself had roles with changing sequences and with names that were next to it the night before and as one's long term. So increasingly people tied to a Joe DeMoro and a Mr. Apruzzi, my fifth grade teacher. People before my fourth grade class in my sixth grade classes before and after him, also increasingly tied to body dumping spots roles and on various natures of organized crime with wet mayors from Weathersfield. Increasingly, people associated with a former Mayor Gold and his family members, brought up by confessions by people associated with whiting forensics and state police, increasingly involved with predicate acts with facts with child offenders, leaders of Kids First Force, and there were more roles with other natures of organized crime with them, and fake motivations. And this was sustained until they're real too. So in other words, they have motive, money, and different things like that are their motivations. But there were also timed collusions with the actual syntax. They put fake conversations with me, whole fake quotations, and they apparently forged the name of a Dr. Shamsi Ali, who's one of the ones involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members, and the family members of judges and prosecutors are personally and professionally criminally involved with this Leahy family, also speaking and having spoken fake things in records, having roles with self-value changed in fake digital evidences. As collusion slash S increasingly with all natures of crime scenes, increasingly people associated with the parks are tied to mayors. Apparently, they took a picture of me next to Mark Violet and a Danielle Perron and I believe it was a Mark. I don't know. There's two twin brothers and other people that said they were her boyfriends too. They take a picture and then they pretend they know you. And before she did that, her brother did that. A Thomas Perron. He's also with a whole bunch of intelligence at corners of streets, like the corner of South Street Highway and Town Line Drive, involved with a Thomas Perron and a Michael Kerr, with judges and prosecutors and people associated with Joseph Lieberman, also brought up in the video of, and these are people increasingly at Central Connecticut State University, involved before the World Trade Center attack, and that's in New Britain, Connecticut. Increasingly involved with on-off Town Line Drive. Increasingly, the people that are working at that shopping center, tied to my neighbors involved with wire crimes with the Weathersfield police and the courts and the forensics names, and then pretending it's personal or against them when I say that, and or just pretending all ways. The difference of it too. And I used at Central Connecticut State University the phrase American exceptionalism. And I had never, this is before everyone started using it and things like that. Right through administrations, the differences between the people attacking the presidents or helping them, that difference is also used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw. Styles, needs, nature, people of self-value, use slash S, roles with that blind sacrifice where people will give their life to fight for their countries, to die for their countries, but no one has the integrity to be a quality fact cheaping nature that brings in that will bring in the relativity of how we have black people's rights of eyes and a breaching method assigned other to be blamed for where and how it assigned other to be communicated, for nature where and how nature has relativity to positive and negative simultaneously, distinctly from, while non-distinctly from, all their identities of volume. Part of as part of that of that necessary to communicate how to discern nature's identities means revelations, natural law, system, the nature of debate regarding who knows about this thing and that. In other words, you guys have the beginning of the Old Testament dictates. It dictates. It says only defend right here. and what comes before it. And that and right here where the names of the people of the sciences will come together. And the part before it. See, boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are grouped by the identity the sciences share. That distinct identity of hyper-simultaneous. It is an identity of relativity to all parts of language, individually grouped together, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously / hyper-simultaneously, so we can discern and appreciate the slash in the hyper-simultaneous part. See, discern. So all these countries have collusions here with psychiatry. A Dr. Schub of modern languages recorded is involved. He doesn't know the extent of it, but his neighbors have a number of collusions within his intelligence families that were asked questions, asked to repeat things that are fake, and to self-value roles with that and cover that up on a mass scale per the breaching method's needs for that, which is also relative because there are certain type of forgiveness is necessary because there is a certain type of person as intelligence experts, as interbranches experts, as the sciences experts, affected by that which used and uses all location /s. Tactical ulterior from how nature uses location /s while being that distinct identity of volume. They all could discern many ways faster and better, than any computer. In other words, because a computer can't be the species volume. Everything's about the hyper-additional nature. And see how you grow up, you're bigger, you have more cells, the bigger, whatever. I don't know if they're bigger or what, but in other words, we are being shown the distinction, the difference between the simultaneous and the hyper-simultaneous is also increasingly valued per how we are being shown. We are inside, just like parts of our body are inside our complete identity. They have a semi-nature relationship to that which is more finite than, while as their value. And it's greater than it. All exceptions, exception nature. Everything comes with demonstration of its relativity to such conversation, such serious conversation, like wars. Like who comes into office, the value of it. Meanwhile, in other words, we have to put down hyper-additional. We have to make a logistical agreements and means for people to feed themselves relative to where and how the breaching method tactically denatured the suburbs, let alone the cities, only capable of unfolding that way. There are suburban homes. There are homes in suburbs across the world. The suburbs in America, they have homes that were built before America's founders were even born. This same scale nature of thing is manifest in Russia and in Ukraine. And it was a slavery method, sickly distinctly north and south, and was measured and maintained. Roles incapable of defending formal syntax by convictions, etc., formal or other, too, the difference in that role is used, and of affording discerned, affording to be, let alone to protract. Short words with convictions proper by, again, by the what nature want us to communicate. Free speech. Hyper peace, not just peace. Hyper free speech, peace. Hyper free speech, please. Nature shows us that they wouldn't use truths for lies, increasingly while simultaneously using lies for lies, forcing or the value or increasingly the difference of that or use /s of nature itself to force equality of fact. We'll come back at this date to the court. They're hiding their motivations and other names involved. So increasingly, since I was a kid, people from the Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts and their family members, I found it's also district court, people with Brian Silver involved. I'm involved with wire crimes on my street and people with medical and sexual offenders of kids, with prosecutors and judges, family members involved, with like this Leahy family. There are people with the name Brendan Leahy, and there are women in their family and generations of their family involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids and abuses of leaders of kids, so they can get others our kids abused and leave out and make up details and keep that self-value. There's increasingly people tied to a Mr. Murphy's daughter associated with Quinnipiac University, increasingly involved with intelligence at Whiting Forensics, at Sandy Hook, and at Central Connecticut State University, in the Britain, Connecticut, Intercities, Connecticut, people at UConn, and at Central Connecticut State University associated with the Mark Violet and his mother and his brother Mike Violet. And people I don't even know the name of them, associated with the spots next to the Capitol and at the state Capitol, are increasingly one of the things that tie people who went out of their way to plant evidences on my street with the people now involved with wire crimes and mail crimes, with the police and the courts at the same time, and the social media, and the differences of guilt between the FBI and CIA. A whole bunch, they want to debate that. They're going to leak things. A whole bunch of withers of Kelly Kismerick brought up in the confessions and confirmations of the year. They make vertical and horizontal confessions from strangers too, no, because this is an identity theft, fraud, slander method, where how nature holds it manifest. The breaching method that we could observe. We have to appreciate science and scientific values honestly and properly, and with that hyper-additional care, the way nature wants and needs us to have it. Vaccines, it's just things belong. So in other words, let's see what. So I took some notes. Judge Napolitano has some good sources. You see, A through Z have unnatural / hyper unnatural impositions upon themselves. I forgot to read the comments. So Judge Napolitano is a former judge. He used to be an expert on the law for Fox News. Before he was no longer with Fox News, and since Fox News, WFSB, and WTNH recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with criminally foreign influence use /s of location /s, and as roles with World Trade Center predicate acts, and with the same names recorded involved increasingly with use /s of proven first force child abusers, principals, and leaders of kids, and a principal. And increasingly people tied to a former police chief, Cintron, like a Mazzucato. There are people with the name Mazzucato and apparently who were influenced to have people take their picture near me so they could pretend make a fake exception of knowing me. Make a fake conversation. I only had a quick conversation about boxing, like playing around when he came into he's all along roads and routes. Route 175 and its conjunctions like Ridge Road and Wethersfield are people involved with retired Wethersfield police chiefs with foreign and domestic medical families, and ones that are on and off campuses putting fake things in databases. 2 speech class teachers I have collusions with them with names at and next to the state corrections offices and at and next to the state judicial branch offices, who are increasingly involved with wire crimes and mail crime methods and home break-ins relative, and whiting forensics with names dropping and stacking. These are people that increasingly pretend that others had conversations with people they don't, and they pretend, oh, everyone's evil. They pretend that in the conversation that they pretend they had, as people using how originally still many ways everyone is criminally foreign influenced who's been speaking for the law, who have been speaking for the sciences per use of location /s. Increasingly, people from the Britain, Connecticut, Central Connecticut State University, they have roles, they affect the confessions to others, intercities, at child campuses of all ages and natures, to then pretend those people had conversations, to pretend fake motivations, as the names involved with all the countries in the news who have time collusion at corners. There are people from Pakistan also involved. And then they're saying, then they started saying they were from India. They said there's a Wali. I never had a conversation with him, and he's one of the ones involved with the people with the name Dylan, and Kerr and Cololo and Demoro. Demoro is the only one I saw inside of a classroom when I was in grammar school, and it was only one time I saw him in my classroom with a Mr. Apruzi, who was also brought up in confessions and demonstrations of people associated with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and the family member of a Dean Judd from Central Connecticut State University, involved also with Detective Samuda, who was involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members, and people associated with them, like involved also with the news at corners of streets and like on Church Street in Old Wethersfield, and exceptions to that, as people involved with wire crimes with the Wethersfield police and home break-ins through time relative, and their roles with calling to the police as a means to plant fake evidences and to screen their roles with a whole bunch of different countries, like the countries involved with Judge Napolitano sources. Prevent changing and faking what people say when they bring up predicate acts with facts, for example, using if they're a lawyer or not. Everyone's forcing a quality of fact-achieving nature that is not just criminal insidiousness. And it's definitely not just the way it is, they say, because it's just because of that, or it's only because of that. So in other words, this is about identity and syntax, styles. So just like a game could have a list of things that could be sent if there's a boxing game. And so the more someone hits the other person's areas of its body first, it starts making that person weak, and then at a certain time they fall down. And you can make a game that way, and you can make it more realistic by making it, they get up there. It's, in other words, how they teach people to make the games is relative to making lists and use of space / existence. And this its identity is relativity, to, from, as, with, and for the difference / hyperdifference of space / existence. 3 ways manifest. As 3 different ways, we could discern 3 distinct parts of the hyper-invisible but still discernible identity of hyper-simultaneous nature. Being and having been valued, appreciated as more values than just that at once, as things we could discern that it is true always. And it asks, and nature shows us to be led by that which is true always, not denying the slightest sequence shift, not denying the slightest finite detail left out, made up the value of it, not denying the value of how and why. It wants questions to be asked, the timing of those questions. On a mass scale, the identity of the sciences are styles, fighting against nature, incapable of speaking for positive truth, integrity, justice, sickly distinctly from overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and A through Z people. Difference / differences now through and as systems tactical ulterior from the one. That is not just because we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time, teaching us about difference. It is how we are discerning its difference. And when we can discern, where we can appreciate the breaching method measured and maintains other things, others, ourselves, blamed for things that our founders and nature itself communicated for us to blame on the breaching method that employed black and white, a part of their syntax, a part of the uses of the database identities of identity / identities of relativity to our names A through Z, as those associated with the republic for which we stand, per it's still abridged. So our voice / voicings abridged in roles or sensed, even through our own, even if it is a majority of people, even if it is everyone. Everyone knows to an extent. We have only heard criminal insidiousness if we pay attention to it, and we understand what criminal insidiousness is properly. We have only heard criminal insidiousness, for example, relative to how other things, others, ourselves, are syntactically blamed, and we're syntactically blamed, where nature itself and our founders obligated us to blame the breaching method. They had that sick breaching method and measured roles, or that body was sensed, but through their own bodies. They had sustained those bodies in groups and everything, hurting each other and or helping each other, because this needs criminal insidiousness. Natures of positive and negative simultaneously. Use / S of them roles simultaneously blame the other things, others, ourselves. To keep from discernment the breaching method's identity of relativity. To really why and how criminal insidiousness natures of positives, roles of positives and negatives are right there discernible, where and how anyone blames other things, others, ourselves for things we know. In other words, we have means to discern this. We have also means, with all natures of difference, per this breaching method that uses all syntax natures remotely, shows them they had to hide live progressions use of their own difference, of other people's differences, of the differences with instances, the differences of who's a leader of which country, which election results come. Oh, because that difference could be an indicator of corruption. There's corruption in all location slash s. There are whole predicate acts with facts methods recorded. There are defenses of identities of knowledge used to get over on the relativity of that. Want to have a debate about it because everyone will go with the guy who's like, well, this is the guy who studies nuclear wars and things like that. That's why we still have nuclear wars. We have these countries that have the means to traverse the earth. The negotiations are just to stay the same natures of industries and means. As systems where the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born for the torture, extortion, and human nature slavery of them. That's pretended debatable. That's gotten away with relative to criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, quality aspects of nature. Tactically delusions wrought simultaneously. If I hear one, in other words, when they use, and then the people who only speak business, they want to use words like extremism. Because they have roles of predicate acts with facts methods. That's hiding behind the differences. The collusion as themselves or the shock and awe. People listening to the criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, quality, leaving out exception nature. Don't leave out these WFSB predicate acts. Increasingly, people like to Gail King, like a Gary Sasso, are involved with people from Wethersfield, Connecticut, with West Hartford locations and Hartford locations. He's in recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with federal evidence, his crimes and narratives regarding his role on Yale Street in Hartford, Connecticut. Involved also with the people involved with the Department of Children's and Family and other boyfriend she had at the same time. One of the investigators there. Involved also with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and foreign and domestic military at New Britain locations. Increasingly people tied to the Wethersfield police chiefs retired, like the Mazzucato family with the police chief Centron, and their roles years before there was even a Starbucks where there is now a Mazzucato bakery. A whole bunch of people at that corner with like a Eric Oliveri and a Ray Collo, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. And that corner has one of the things that connects the people that were planting evidences, collusions, that don't even have classes or whether or no. In all exceptions, they try to make them look that like the other. That's recorded too. As people increasingly speaking big faking records with their family members. Because the difference of their roles or the overt criminal enterprises or the private ones or the criminal and seriousness natures of the other countries shared on and off the campuses and with the ones next to them as the ones involved. Increasingly, people tied to a Della Fera family and they have roles with foreign and domestic medical families and judges speaking fake things in records and prosecutors and their family members, planting things in databases, and then timing where people are going to be. And so, so they could pretend illusions were in how too. They lie to people's family members where they don't have the right to lie. In other words, these are roles with identity theft, fraud. I never even had a class with them. And like with these Mendes police involved with child offenders of various natures, including medical and sexual, with the families next to Hartford Hospital. Increasingly involved with the work criminal enterprises and private ones, and people with the shopping centers, and like with the managers of and other natures of roles with the shopping centers, and with their differences and responses to it. So you guys have disgusting natures and methods of uses of different roles. In other words, forging and switching names interbranch, preventing writing so you can cover up how you are and have been stacking fake writing in databases every day. You guys are a certain type of victim slash hyper victim as judges A through Z relative to this, relative to you guys preventing mandated law with people, in other words, all excuses you're going to find have answers. They're hiding the motivations for it. Then I bring up 500 million going to Ukraine. In other words, even that little amount with 50 states and all the imposition, the suburbs were designed incapable of needing food and resources from other locations, areas, and states, not just through a system tactical terror from its own, through a system slash S tactical terror from its own. And that individual system, also used by its individual system, no one fathoming. You guys speak about positive or negative value, positive or negative money, leaving out exception. Guys have rules of wire crime acts and methods. Mandated law dictates that you get the judge, the courts and prosecutors. There are all kinds of sneaky law rules and agencies and intelligence, foreign and domestic military too involved with this, and with the Trantola. And they have other natures of lawyers in their syntax. These are people putting fake conversations and fake transcripts with the police. And then they have some other lawyers putting advertisement. Oh, but don't make sure because the police don't want to hear. That's true, but they're using that truth for a lie, as rolls with torture, extortion, and slavery. These are courts that have been collusions at crime scenes since they were founded. They're only capable of it. In other words, forgiveness is because everyone came through sickly distinctly, but also non-distinctly abridged sciences. You guys have, again, other blame for things our founders told us, communicated for us to blame on the breaching method. They're using what they said, leaving out what is actually communicated. They're using their roles with those natures of collusions, those natures of actual motivations for what's actually going and having gone down at all natures of campuses, including the ones filmed 24/7. They just replace and fake what's recorded on campuses. They put fake pretended transcripts to make it look like things were recorded and people were tied to each other and never were at all. Eric Burgess is one of the ones from the military. Affected confessions to me like that. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. I didn't know his name at the time. And I don't know all their names. They're switching names. There's an Officer Hunter involved at Central Connecticut State University, non-verbally confirmed I observed it. He doesn't even know that. And then his roles next to the state capitol with people. And like with his lawyer, the lawyer of Robert Chevalier. Robert Chevalier has roles near the state capitol, near the Mark Twain, Harry Beecher Stollhouse, used criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw too, used to measure and maintain. Other capable of being, what they defend regarding the sciences and their values and the names of people, and, their syntax, the nature of it, that can't be defended and afforded discerned. Afforded to be, let alone to protract short words in nature proper regarding how really Hartford unfolded. In other words, all locations, areas, and states. How really and why really slavery was left entrenched the way it was. Really what countered it. So, excuse me.